Society's ills, it's because we're missing God. No, I don't mean a big man in the sky. But in this episode, I'd like to share a little bit of my observations on Western society and godlessness and why it's leading us astray. This is the Catharsis Project. It's just a place for me to share some of my thoughts. It's not to be taken too seriously. It's just a bit of a playground. So I hope that you listen to this with a playfulness and not a seriousness. A couple weeks ago, I was driving around with one of my friends, and he is one of the most generous, kind, really curious people I've ever met. He's a really just fun, awesome dude to be around. And what I've noticed with my friend is that we agree on a lot in life. Like there's like a lot of things, from philosophy to, the games we play, the food we eat, I don't know, politics. Like there's a lot of things that I'm like, damn, like we really are close on a lot of the stuff that we value. But there's like these sticking points, these like moments where I'm like, damn, like something is just not fully compatible, which is great because I think we should have friends who are similar and different and easy and challenging. Like we should have a diversity of people around us. So I don't want to make clones of me and just hear myself back all the time. So I'm happy that there's some sticking points. There's some places where I'm like, damn, like we really don't agree. Like we really construct meaning in different ways. And so we were driving around in the car and we were trying to get to the bottom, I feel, or I don't know. I was a bit like drilling down into like, what the fuck is it here? Like, why is it that we come so close, but it feels like then like, something is not aligned. Like we do kind of see things really different. And so I want to just share, I'm going to paraphrase a little bit because it's not my worldview, it's his worldview. And then I'll share kind of my worldview and how I kind of construct my meaning, just to illustrate like two different ways of seeing the world and the real kind of implications that starts to have as we go into politics, but even how we live our day-to-day life. So when we were kind of really getting to the core of certain beliefs, like with my friend and I, we really started talking about protests and ICE and what do you do? And we have this disagreement on a fundamental level because he believes more ardently in kind of preparing for ICE coming to Philadelphia, the city that we live in, and kind of preparing for that, if quote unquote, eventuality, so that we can kind of muster the fight against ICE. And my philosophy is like a little bit different, which is I will respond to what's in front of me in my life. So if I see something, I'm going to say something or I'm going to do something. And I want to be the kind of person that in the moment, if something arises, I can take action in the moment. That's like one of my core things. But I've tried to move away from like predicting what's going to happen, trying to prepare for things and trying to kind of create an ideology or a premise that then I want to try to meet or even manifest on some level. Instead, I'm like, if I see something in front of me, an injustice or something that arises, an emotion in me that I feel like needs to be acted on, I want to be able to do it in the moment. I gave an example to my friend, which is earlier in my life, 2016, 17, about 9-10 years ago now. During the first Trump administration, there was the Women's March in Washington, D.C. So I went to the Women's March in Washington, D.C. I made the signs, rah, rah, rah. I mean, it was fun. It was an enjoyable event. I'm happy I went. I don't have any regrets, but I don't feel like I actually did anything or moved the needle. Again, not a waste of time or effort because I got to hang out with my friends and have a cool experience. But on a political level, I don't know that I actually did anything to move I don't know what changed that event had on society, if any at all. I contrast that with when I was at university, I was in college. I went to a party and there was a woman who was drinking quite a lot, and she'd get to the point where I think she was probably blacking out and starting to kind of like lose motor function. So, you could see she wasn't really even able to kind of like stand up right. And there was this creepy guy who started to kind of swoop in. And my friend and I, we saw this, so we stepped in and we basically got the guy the fuck out of there, told him to go home. because it was clear that he was trying to take advantage of this woman. So we stepped in, we used a little physicality, nothing crazy, but just to kind of make our point. And the guy left the party and he went away. And I think that night, I'm like, I think I did more good, quote unquote, good that night than I did by driving to Washington, D.C. and spending all day protesting, because there was like an immediate situation where someone was in danger and I was able to act upon it in the moment. So that's a little bit of my philosophy, is like, I will act in the moment, but I'm not going to kind of create hypotheticals and prepare for something that might never happen around me. So that's kind of like one of the central debates that we had, is like, if I am confronted with something, like ICE comes and I see something and I feel like I have a role to play in that, then I hope that I have the constitution in the moment to take that role. Now we even went deeper of like, well, what helps you be able to kind of step up in the moment? And in my humble experience, what I've seen with myself and others is doing a lot of things around nervous system training, trauma therapy. Like, the more we're in our body and present and not kind of, wired from the past, the more we can respond to the moment, right? But if you're responding to the past, then you're not really in the moment. So you can't really effectuate change here and now. So I do believe that kind of working on trauma and past conditioning is it's like a vital step before we get to the point where we can be responsive and adaptive in the moment. But if you've done that homework, right, you've gone to therapy, you've gotten in your body, you feel embodied, you're in your emotions, then I do tend to now trust myself in the present moment much, much more. So, okay, this is a little bit now like we go then like a couple rungs deeper with my friend in the car. We're discussing. And what we end up getting to, which I thought was quite interesting, is we had to start talking about the nature of God and how we conceptualize the universe and the laws of the universe. So I'm paraphrasing here, but a lot of my friends' kind of worldview was a little bit of like, we're in this cosmic battle between good and evil. There's a kind of a God and a Satan, and we have kind of like holy warriors, like righteous people who can do actions, right? The right action, righteous action, to get us back closer to God. So, we've had this fall from grace, and like kind of Satan is hijacking us all. And as I heard it, I understood it fully. I'm not here to invalidate anyone's worldview because, one, I don't know. Who the fuck knows? I don't have direct evidence for anything about the share. This is all just my observations and hypothesis of how shit is happening, but like, I don't fucking know. I think anyone who says they know, I'm like, how the fuck do you know? How are you so certain? There's no material proof. So I'm like, I say things as like a theory. I don't have material proof, but this is how I've kind of conceptualized the universe, which is, it just is. It just is. Before humans were here to kind of make meaning of things, there was billions of years where things just existed. There was rocks and elements and stars and qubits at the quantum realm and electrons, and like all of these things just existed. There was no good or bad, right or wrong, like holy or evil. There just was a bunch of matter and energy floating around in the fucking universe. And as an aside, every time I tap into it, I don't feel like the universe is this cold, dispassionate, cruel kind of place. I see the universe as probably neutral. But if there's a such thing as a positive neutral, I feel it as a positive neutral. I think it's quite easy to become very nihilistic and be like, oh, nothing matters. Like, let's just fucking optimize for our pleasure and hedonism and, fuck shit up and be selfish. And I don't see it that way either. When I look at the beauty of the universe, I see this incredible orderliness. There's laws that govern everything. There's free energy. Is literally the concept of the universe, is that there's free energy everywhere in total infinite abundance. So we start from a blank canvas, and in somehow is even that like is an assumption. I don't know that we start with a blank canvas, but this whole thing that we're in, this container, I don't know if it even is a container, but this whole thing starts, at least from when time starts, it starts with free energy. Look at the quantum realm. Look at even how the material Newtonian realm with stars and matter, everything is fucking given to us for free. It's incredible. It's like the law of the universe is abundance. It is all there. Because if matter cannot be created or destroyed, just transformed, it means everything we want and need is already there. It's crazy. So we've been given this incredible gift by the universe as living beings, and everything just kind of is and was and will be. Before humans arrived, could you go to a rock and say that rock is good or evil? That feels a little silly, right? A rock is just a rock. Would you go to a lion that needs to eat and say you're evil for hunting an antelope? I don't know. I have met very few people in my life who think a lion is evil for just continuing its own life. So then is a human being evil for continuing its own life? No, it's in our nature to propel life forward. So being a human, there's for how many thousands of years this debate, are we good or evil? And I'm like, I don't know. I think we just are. I think we just are human beings. And the last few years, I kind of fucked people up around me because they're like, oh, you're a good person. I'm like, I don't think I'm a good person. I genuinely, at my core, at this point in my life, I don't think I'm a good person. I don't think I'm a bad person either. I think I'm just a person. I'm just an ordinary guy having an experience. I do good things. I do bad things. I do good things that have negative consequences. I do bad things that probably have good consequences. There's a lot that I'm not aware of when it comes to my impact on the things all around me. But I know for a fact there's all kinds of things that I co-sign that are quote unquote bad. My iPhone, which if you have a phone, we're essentially using something that was produced by slave labor. I don't know how anyone can look at themselves and say, I'm a good person. I don't think I'm a good person. I think I'm just a person. And people generally use and need to use phones. Or fuck it, I just choose to use a phone with that knowledge. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with using a cell phone whose minerals were mined by slaves. Does that make me jump up for joy? No. But it's just honest. It's an honest accounting of there's a lot of things in my life that are produced by bad people and I benefit from them. So I don't know how to sit here and tell you I'm a good person, So this is a kind of a moralism, right? Moralism is that there is a binary, there's a good and a bad, there's a better and a worse, there's a vertical relationship, so something is superior to something else. And a lot of the kind of dualistic good and evil worldview is we have to do acts to be good. In my worldview, because I view the universe as one, it's just one thing, and I'm not separate from that oneness. I'm part of the matter and energy that's floating around in space. I just struggle to conceptualize my acts as good or bad. Now, I think it's easy then again to jump into either a cynicism, a nihilism, this kind of anarchy bullshit. I already said, the universe is a very orderly place. I think there are universal principles and universal laws that govern how the universe works and how systems work. And I do think it's in our best interest to align ourselves with those universal causes and universal laws. It just makes things way easier. It's almost a very utilitarian, but it just makes life easier to be in alignment with these laws. I believe there's free will, and I'll get back to that in a second. And it's our free will to deviate from those laws if we wish and have an experience and learn something and record something in the fabric of the universe. But yeah. A lot of this comes down to how does the human mind really work? And our mind, which adapted for our own survival in this materialistic world known as Earth, what was advantageous to us was to have a part of our brain that sorts things and categorizes and compares things. So the mind is a survival tool. It's not a truth machine. It is not the arbiter of capital T truth. There's a lot of things our senses are not built to detect. For instance, birds fly south. They can sense electromagnetism. We, to the best of our ability, cannot detect electromagnetism. Doesn't mean electromagnetism doesn't exist. It just means we can't sense it. We can never really touch the world directly. We always touch it through one of our senses. So we're always at least one step removed from reality, and then we must make meaning of our senses, which then is at least a second step removed from reality. Our mind is a hallucination machine. It just wants to construct an image of a world so that we can survive and adapt and continue propagating life. It's very successful. It's clearly very, very successful because we've been able to adapt and flourish for a long time. But let us not mistake our own perception for truth. I think that's like a big one. And let's not be so confident that our perception is truth. So anytime you perceive something as capital T truth, I'm like, how do you really know? How do you really know? It's just what you think in this moment in time. What I find interesting in a lot of what I call kind of like the Western European cultural horizon, which we can also kind of talk about as the Enlightenment cultural horizon. So a lot of what Western cultural thought is built on the last few hundred years. There is this like desire for rationalism, which has its beauty. And there's this kind of like creeping atheism that has, or at least dropping of religion that has started to again expand throughout most of the kind of Atlantic, North Atlantic society, United States and Western Europe. What I noticed is when I talk to people, the people who are the most quote unquote rational and the ones that are like, God doesn't exist and are atheistic, what I find is like those a lot of times are like the most fucked up people that I talk to. They are super in their head. They're very hyper analytical. They honestly have a lot of anxiety and depression. They have very little emotional intelligence. They're not connected to their own body, their own senses. And yet they sit there in this kind of superiority of like, you're silly because you believe in God. I'm not talking about, again, an anthropomorphized guy. I'm not talking about there's a man in the sky who's dictating things. For me, God is just a proxy of like, what is the big cosmic order? How do we really see the interconnectedness between everything happening in the cosmos? This kind of like rejection of God and like, I, human being, am at the center of everything. And it's my rationalism, like the weakest link of everything is our brains, I think. Our mind, the chattering monkey brain, which is just constantly trying to predict the future and control things, and is just this hallucination machine. It's like so fascinating that that's the seat that then you make that your God, essentially, right? Is like the truth, the source of truth is the chattering monkey mind. And I'm like, that's like arguably the worst fucking God I could think of is the chattering monkey mind. Like, that's awful. It's like the least permanent, least objective. And I believe it also is a little bit of this, like, again, the overconfidence of like, I know a couple things, so I think I know everything. I'm reminded by this quote from Heisenberg. It's a pretty popular quote, but it's the first gulp from the glass of natural sciences will make you an atheist. But at the bottom of the glass, God is waiting for you. And that's the father of quantum physics, quantum mechanics. Because when we really go deep into the order of the universe and how things are interconnected and how the quantum realm really works, it starts to challenge a lot of our, I think, preconceptions about how things really work. So I believe we are part of the universe. I believe it is our small little brain that tells us we're somehow separate. Again, matter cannot be created or destroyed, just transformed. We are part of the whole thing. It's a very cliche stoner, weed smoking quote, but it's like we are the universe experiencing itself. I don't know how one can argue with that. It's just a material scientific fact. And it's our brain that wants us to kind of say, no, we're separate. So before our little brain game to kind of judge and evaluate everything, I return back to, was there good and evil? If a lion eats an antelope, is that evil? If a meteor smashes into a planet and no one's around to hear it, did it happen? Is it evil? I think a lot of these binaries really start to collapse with just even a little bit of like gray zone, right? A little bit of the in between. I call this the Les Miserables defense, which is Jean Valjean stole a loaf of bread and so he goes to prison. And it's like, but if you're starving and someone else has loaves of bread, can you justify a starving man stealing a loaf of bread? Like, yeah, I can. If I was in that position, if I was starving to death, would I steal a loaf of bread? Yeah, sure. If there's that much fucking bread. Yeah, I'm going to steal a loaf of bread. So a lot of these binaries, like what is good, what is evil, you can always kind of create loopholes and ways around things. I think at the core, when I was talking to my friend, and I was talking about this, okay, but like there's this good and evil. There's the God versus Satan. which on some level, again, I find a little bit anthropomorphizing, but even if we say it's not, okay, there's two forces in the universe at play here. So then we must believe that God is not all powerful, right? Like God is in equilibrium with Satan. So is it a yin yang kind of thing? Or is Satan overwhelming God? Like so then I'm back to like, what the fuck is God? Because in my conception, if God is everything, God is all, God is one, then God is all powerful because it's everything. It includes and is everything. It's not separate from. And so what he shared with my friend, which I was like, oh, okay, so that's like one of the roots, is that he cannot accept living in a world where suffering is part of God's plan. So why would God choose to kill a little child or to, bring suffering on an innocent? And that's when I kind of understood. I'm like, oh, interesting. So like at the core of some of, at least for his worldview, like suffering is just an unacceptable part of life. And he even told me like, it's easier to think God is not all powerful than to think suffering is part of the plan. So what is suffering? Well, I think we can accept that pain is a part of life. Yeah. And I think it's a vital part of life because pain is often one of the best teachers, the pain teacher. It's the reason why we don't continuously, put our hand on the fire on the stove. Pain is a remarkable teacher, whether that's psychic or physical pain. We learn through pain. Suffering is prolonged pain, right? It's a chronic pain. And sometimes it's chosen, sometimes it's not, right? If you have like an injury and that nagging injury stays with you the rest of your life, that is a form of suffering that often we cannot choose to change. We lose someone that we love. We have a very strong attachment to that person. Often, for most of us, that pain, that wound can feel chronic for a very long time or forever. We carry that becomes a form of suffering. There's some, of course, suffering that we choose. I see this in my day job a lot when I'm coaching leaders and CEOs. Because we all have been trained in certain behavior and certain patterns, we find those predictable and comfortable, and so we keep choosing those again and again, even if the outcomes are subpar. Often, it's crazy to observe, but often we as humans choose suffering over and over and over again because it's knowable. We know what the outcome will be. Choosing new behaviors is risky and scary, and we don't want to try new strategies, so we stick to what we know. In my kind of worldview, the way I construct my meaning, suffering is a part of life. Even before humans were here, animals suffered. Plants can probably suffer in their own unique ways, but I believe suffering existed long before humans were here to observe it. And so if suffering is a natural part of the universe, and on some level, I believe we have to accept reality as it is. That doesn't mean condone it. It doesn't mean do it. It means, okay, this is what reality is. So it's a part of reality. I don't reject reality. I don't live inside a delusion. This is not an excuse to go again, spread suffering all around. I believe, as I mentioned, that there's an order to the universe and there's laws and principles that keep systems sustainable. And I believe one of our tasks as human beings is to try to ascertain those laws and to build the types of systems and structures that observe and accept and honor the natural order and natural laws of the universe. One of which is reciprocity, another one being actions and consequences, action reaction. There are certain fundamental rules and laws that we can bend and we can break, but then there's a consequence to it. And there's a learning. Hopefully, you'd think there's a learning to it. So this is another kind of key, kind of pivotal thing, is this whole thing about like free will. Right? I personally believe there is free will, but the shape of that can look very different. So in my friend's kind of dualistic view, he believes that there's been this like fall from grace and like we've been hijacked by Satan. And then we have to prove through our worldly deeds, through righteous action, that we are morally good. So to get closer to God. So we have to work towards getting closer to God. In my worldview, because we already all are God, we are God and everything around us is God. Because everything is one, everything is the universe already. I don't think it's possible to ever not be godly. I think we are always part of the whole. What I believe free will allows us to do is to disconnect from that fact. It's to distance ourselves from that fact, to create a warped reality, a delusion where we forget that fact. So if I were to put it in a dualistic way, then I believe we already are children of God, and free will are the actions we take that move us closer, quote unquote, to Satan. But even that delusion, the disconnection, that's part of the human experience. That's part of what we're capable of. So even that, I can't judge. I just see it as another facet of exploring another part of the human condition and exploring another part of godliness. It's just within us as individuals, we forget, we disconnect. So I really don't see it as evil, good and evil. I really just see it as connection, disconnection. Besides, what is goodness? Can anyone really define what is good in a way that cannot be violated? Like there's no exceptions to that? What is good beyond exception? Because everything I've seen or read or studied or heard, haven't seen anyone articulate what does good mean. Feels like it's entirely subjective and it lives inside someone's head. And then they become an authority figure. And then ironically, they end up becoming like an institutional religion saying this is good and this is bad. But I have not found any internal logic that really holds up to this kind of good and evil. What I talk about more than goodness is integrity. Integrity is being in full alignment where like every cell of your body is like a yes towards something, where what you want, what you do, what you say, what you think all lines up. Bang, 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 bang. This alignment does not mean some sort of like moral goodness, but it means like something within the mind-body system is like a fucking arrow. It's so clean. It's so clear. It moves with such great intent and there's no ripples in the water. It just moves cleanly. And I think we agree on some level that intent really matters. Even if we look at our legal code, all of our legal code is orientated around intent. So if I accidentally kill someone, we call that manslaughter. Say, okay, it was an accident. If I become a fucking psycho serial killer and I stalk someone and I fucking, premeditate everything, we would say, oh, fuck, that's different, right? The end result is someone died, but the intent matters. Or even we have a third degree, I think it's quite literally called second degree or third degree murder, where it's just like, I just did it spontaneously. I killed someone spontaneously in the moment. Self-defense, act of passion, but it wasn't premeditated, right? So premeditation is like the highest form of like bad, right? Or highest form of punishment. I think on some level, we all kind of agree to this. Like if we were to hear those three stories, I think we generally think that the punishment, if we allotted punishment, should be different for all three. So intent matters, and intent is the underpinning of integrity. And here's where it gets really weird, right? I try to talk about this in a separate episode, but I return back to Soren Kierkegaard. Kierkegaard was a philosopher. I think he was Danish. I don't know. European. Some guy. And he talked about the night of faith. His whole thing was if there is a God and God gives you divine instructions and you're a true believer, you have true faith, then you must act on the word of God, right? Otherwise, you're not a true believer. Or then back to my book, you have free will to ignore God if you wish to disconnect from that. And in theory, if we follow kind of a bit of a Protestant way of thinking is we each have access to God. The Catholics might say, no, it's only the Pope, right? You have to go to this human authority figure. But in a kind of Protestant Calvinist way, we might say we each have a direct relationship with God. So each one of us could receive instructions and we must follow it through, right? Otherwise, we're not really servants of God. But what happens if these godly acts look immoral? And what Kierkegaard looks at is the binding of Isaac. So Abraham receives instructions. Abraham is the chosen fucking guy. He receives instructions from God that he has to kill his son Isaac. So he takes his ass up a mountain and he binds him and he swings to kill him. And it's only in that moment that God's like, cool, thank you. You affirmed your faith. All's good. You don't actually have to complete this motion swinging this knife at your fucking son. It's a very interesting, it's from the Old Testament, but it's such an interesting story because I think it really challenges us. Are fundamentalists essentially all right? If you're a fundamentalist Christian and a fundamentalist Muslim and a fundamentalist this and that, are you right in a way because you're following what you believe is God's word? And can we ever know if that role is really yours or not? That's where it gets like really complicated, because I don't know what your role is in this grand play, this grand thing called the universe. I believe if someone tells you they know what the final act of the play should look like and where the play should go, I would get very, very suspicious of them. And being very honest, I just like, how do you know that? How do you know that? And why do you feel like you should impose that on everyone else? Did another human authority tell you it? Or is that your own kind of interpretation? Did God tell you? But then what makes what God told you different than what God told someone down the street? So we've run into a lot of issues here, but I don't know what your role is. My task in this life is to figure out my role and to do it to the best of my abilities. And then you figure out your role. It's not my job to figure out your role for you or to fucking impose roles on other people. That is power hungry as fuck. So I don't know the script. I don't know how the play is supposed to go. That's like basically saying like, you do know God, right? Like you like, I know. How the fuck do you know? And so I'm reminded of this MLK quote, also very famous. If it falls your lot to be a street sweeper, sweep streets like Michelangelo painted pictures, sweep streets like Beethoven composed music, sweep streets like Shakespeare wrote poetry, sweep streets so well that all the hosts of heaven and earth will have to pause and say, here lived a great street sweeper who swept his job well. If you can't be a pine at the top of the hill, be a shrub in the valley. Be the best little shrub on the side of the hill. There's so much profound wisdom, I find, in that quote, in that framing. But the open question is, do we know what role other people should have? For instance, a few months ago, I was watching some World War II thing. I don't know, something probably online. And there was a German soldier. I can't remember if it was someone who was a part of the Nazi party or part of the SS, but they were at least a soldier. I think they were probably just a soldier. I don't know. Anyways, this guy, he was in his 80s or 90s when they filmed this interview. And he was recounting like all the people he killed in the war. And the man was just alive. Like you could see like there was a joy in his eyes. It was like, this was like the best fucking experience of his life. And everything in him seemed to ring out in integrity. His actions, his thoughts, his like everything, like his intention, like everything was so fully fucking aligned. And his role was to be a soldier, and he was a great fucking soldier. So would you describe that soldier like Michelangelo or Beethoven or Shakespeare? Maybe. I mean, again, it fucks with our kind of sense of moral good, moral bad, but kind of. I mean, if our job is to figure out our role and do it well, and we don't know the roles, and there's some, then like on some level, sure, maybe that's true. Can you have an enlightened soldier? Maybe. I don't know what would prevent someone from being an enlightened soldier, unless there's something within them that knows at their core, this isn't their role, this isn't their intention, this isn't what they want to do in their life. And then, yeah, sure. Then don't be a soldier because it's not your role, right? We're constantly, though, being forced into roles that are not our own, or we choose to take on roles that are not our own. Again, back to the suffering question. We take on things that are not us because it's safe and predictable, and we want to kind of get along with the collective. This is where I think the most important figure in Christianity, I think, or at least our attitudes towards, is Judas. If we agree that the Christ, everything had to happen the way it happened, right? Like if that was the divine story that needed to happen, yeah. Unless we, again, somehow as humans are like, no, I know better. The story should have ended differently. Okay. All right. But let's say like that's the story that needed to be told, because if it is divine and it had to happen that way, then we need a character in the play that will betray Jesus publicly. That is the most difficult role in the play. It is the heaviest. It is of any other of the mortal men, right? The disciples or anyone else. The most that was asked of a mortal man was of Judas. Judas, who loved Jesus, believed in Jesus, and was also given free will and chose to betray the man he loved to keep the story going. Someone had to play that role. And the weight of that role destroyed him. He killed himself. But he had to do that. So we must, if we're going to love Jesus, I believe we must love Judas. Otherwise, the story is incomplete. There's no catalyzer. I'm reminded of the play Hamilton. So Lin-Manuel Miranda was asked, how did you write Aaron Burr in such an amazing way, right? Aaron Burr, again, arguably one of the best characters ever written, really kind of a big anchor point, the soul of a lot of the play. And Lin-Manuel said, I had to go beyond good and evil, beyond good and bad, and I had to fall in love with Aaron Burr. Only when I fell in love with Aaron Burr could I see his real humanity, have compassion for him, understand him, accept him, and then write a part in a play that did him justice. Compassion is not condoning. It doesn't mean that, yeah, let's go do this. Yeah, like I'm for it. But compassion is really just understanding things as they are and not fighting reality. So I believe Judas, Aaron Burr, yeah, it's easy. They're bad. I'm better than them. They're bad. I'm good. They're bad. But really, I'm like, shit. They had really strong roles to play, difficult roles to play, the most difficult probably, and they did their job fucking well. I think reading the MLK quote about Michelangelo and Beethoven, could there be a better Judas than Judas? Is that not his form of art to this world? A lot of what this boils down to me is very human, but in this search for like making a dualistic world, we're really just looking for certainty, predictability. It's kind of like moral purity. So it's like, I know how the play is supposed to end, and now I will measure myself against that. So I create order for myself. I create order for how things should be in this world. But honestly, a lot of times what I see with those folks is anxiety, nihilism, disembodiment. They tend to skew, actually, even if they're not part of the Catholic Church, they create their own churches, their own new religions, but disconnect from actual religiosity, from godliness, from spirituality, from seeing and feeling the interconnectedness of everything. And that's what I see missing in the world today, is that sense of unity, of oneness, of interconnection, of remembering reality and living in reality, not constructing worlds of delusion and just trying to make ourselves a little bit better by pretending the world isn't a difficult place to live in. Life is hard. The world is hard. There is suffering. There is pain. There's discomfort and difficulties. And if you observe nature, you see that all around you. I don't think the antelope is too happy to be killed by the lion. So as long as we make that our struggle, that's our fight. As our fight is against suffering, our fight is against unpredictability, our fight is against unknowingness, then we're always fighting reality instead of remembering, connecting, being part of this amazing greater whole. You're having a little bit of like humility of like, I don't know where it's going. I don't know what it's supposed to look like. I don't know what the end state is. Probably don't even know what my own role in it is in all of this. I certainly don't know what the role of the person down the street is or halfway around the world. Maybe they're a great catalyzer. Maybe they have a very difficult role they've been asked to play in the play. Maybe something is needed for change and adaptation, and maybe it looks ugly. But look inside the heart of that person. Look inside the intent and that integrity of that person. Maybe we will find godliness. Maybe they are a knight of faith, as Kierkegaard proposed. I don't know. So that's today's musings, today's episode. One that certainly felt and feels like vulnerable to share because, again, kind of growing up in a very kind of quote unquote rational world, very disconnected world. Feels strange to talk about like faith and God and spirituality. And there is, of course, a fear in me of the judgment of people who are like, that's silly, that's dumb. But I keep returning back to like when I'm in my integrity, when I'm in my role, I'm like, that is what's true to me. That is honest. And I don't want to hide that. So I would like to free myself. There's so many different religions and authority figures that condemn godliness and religiosity. And a lot of the Judeo-Christian moralizing, for whatever reason, is very threatened by spirituality, true personal connection to godliness. I don't know why. Maybe that's an episode for another day, but I think it is my task to just share where I'm at, how I construct my world, how I construct my meaning, put it out there.